Big 3 NBA podcast is powered by PrizePicks and the Gametime app.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Big 3 NBA podcast. The usual, Sherrod Blakely, myself, Kwani Lunis, Gary Washburn. Hello, how are ya? Happy New Year.
Wonderful. Happy St. Patrick's Day. I see Gary got his lucky green on.
He does have his green on.
Before we get into the show, Kwani,
let's do it.
Shout out to Danny Ainge because it's his birthday.
True.
Shout out to Terry Rozier because it's his birthday.
Yeah.
And last but not least, shout out to a guy I know that's near and dear to Gary's heart, mine too, Mike Terry. It's his birthday as well.
Oh, there we go. Happy birthday.
There we go. That's the other big three.
We like that. And we will not bore you with our singing, so happy birthday. I love that.
I can sing. I don't know about you. I can sing.
All right, let's hear it then.
Now we good. We got show to do.
That's what I thought. We got to get into the rundown. All right, we'll start with Celtics versus Miami. Boston won 2 straight, 7 of the last 10. They're seeking number 50 versus Utah on Friday, this upcoming Friday overall. What is the value? Let's just, as we check in at this point in the season, they've clinched a playoff spot. What is the value of 50 wins for the Celtics right now?
For them, it's just another milestone, or mile marker on the journey for them. I mean, it doesn't have any, make or break your season type of implications. But this is one thing you got to keep in mind, though. This will be their 4th year in a row with 50 or more wins. And the last time they did that was the beginning of the other Big 3 era with KG, Paul, and Ray. So it speaks to just their consistency to being one of the top teams in the NBA. But one of the differences I would say now is that back then they started off obviously as a juggernaut from day one, and then gradually the next couple of years you could see kind of a decline. This team, just the opposite. I mean, they won 50 more games 4 years in a row, and they look like they could win another 50 or more for the next 2-3 years easy, based upon the way their roster is built. So it's another mile marker for them in what has been a team that has shown consistently that they can be among the best and one of the last teams standing when all said and done.
Yeah, I think it's it's a milestone, like Sherrod said. It'll be the 4th year in a row that they've won 50 games, and the 3rd consecutive season for Joe Mazzulla to win at least 50 games. But they just locking in on the playoffs right now. The records, it's getting to the point where they're separating themselves from the Knicks. They're 6 games ahead of the Knicks, so it's likely that they're going to be the number 2 seed. And they just trying to get some guys rest. So I think winning is always important. I think that's the main goal. And obviously Joe Mazzulla will let you know that, hey, we're trying to win the game. We're not trying to go out here and just play hard and lose. We're trying to get a dub. And that's very important. But I also think rest is important and getting guys some reps. But I also think getting to 50 games, wins, and getting trying to push the 60 level. I think they can maybe get to 57, 58 wins. It would be they'd have to go, I think, 11-3 to get to 60, which is possible. I mean, they can do that. They have a couple of tough games left, but I just think to try to get as many wins as you can, rest guys, but also just understand the big picture. And I think this team understands that. But I think the number 50 is always a good number for an NBA team in terms of getting those dubs.
Hey, Gary, I had a question for you, though, Gary. Now I think about it. Because, whenever I have a question about Joe Mazzulla, I immediately think of Gary Washburn.
Yeah, sure.
Oh, Gary, what do you think him winning 50 games every single year means to Joe? Because remember, I think most people sometimes forget that Joe didn't exactly ascend to the head coaching position in the most traditional manner. And in fact, there are lots of questions about whether, but when they made the hire, whether that was the right hire. And, what are your thoughts on him not only winning a championship, but being able to year in, year out consistently win at a pretty high level?
Well, I think it says a lot about his coaching, it says a lot about the players, and it says a lot about the talent that Brad Stevens has put around him. I think all the facets have worked well over the last few years. I know over the years, they fell short a couple of times, and they lost in the finals under the one season under Ime, where they probably, it's a series they could have won, and against Golden State, they kind of fell apart toward the end. But they haven't had the consistency over the years. I'm talking about like with the roster moves, and I think the two moves that put him over the top is obviously Drew Holiday and Kristaps Porzingis. And I think adding those two guys, unfortunately moving on from Marcus Smart and letting a couple other guys go, was just something that they felt like they had to do. But I think that's put them to another level. I think this team has just been – this current state of franchise has been the best it's been since the 08, team and that lasted for a few years. They could have went, they obviously won in 08, could have went to the finals in 09, but Garnett got hurt, lost in game 7 in 2010. So that was a great 3-year period. Then the slippage happened in 11 with LeBron, going to Miami and 12 or whatever. But that was a great run. But this has a chance to be just as good, if not better. If they can get another chip out of this, they're better than that 08 squad in terms of the era, right? And that's what they're chasing. They're chasing history. So I think it's important for them to understand the history of the organization. And it's important for people to appreciate Joe for the job that he's done. It's not easy coaching teams with a lot of talent. We've seen a lot of teams with talent fall apart with injuries and just,
Phoenix.
Yeah, we saw Phoenix yesterday just play like they didn't want to be there, like they was ready to throw their chips in. They had rather been at the laundromat. They rather been getting a root canal. They would have been doing taxes. They would have been at their mother-in-law's house watching Matlock. They would have been anything.
Damn, Gary, that was very specific. That last one.
They would rather been anything but at Crypto.com Arena to play the Lakers. I mean, that was a sad part. Like they played like a bunch of dogs, and that team has what? One sure Hall of Famer in Durant, one probably Hall of Famer in Devin Booker, and then even Bradley Beal's a good player, and they just played like a bunch of dogs. And you can see it. If you don't have that chemistry, you don't have that coaching, you don't have that acumen, it won't work in the NBA. I don't care how much talent you have, and I think Joe has shown that they have the chemistry, the acumen, and the want to, and the motivation that other teams really don't have. A lot of other teams don't have.
So you mentioned those 4 things that they need to really keep a championship, stay at a championship level, but how do they sustain it over the years? Injuries aside, because obviously you can't predict or control that.
Yeah, I think they've just managed to stay healthy and have that desire. And also guys are chasing personal things. Jason wants to be an MVP. Jalen wants his respect. And it's okay to have some personal agendas in how you play the game. And it's you can't be all for team. Now there's going to be some personal stuff, even in your contract. Hey, we give you $2 million, or if you get 100 steals in a season or whatever it is, you got incentives. So I think the guys have blended perfectly personal goals with team goals. When it gets overly personal, when guys are just chasing numbers, we've seen that. And sometimes guys sacrifice too much or don't know what their role is and that type of thing. The one thing I know is about Oklahoma City is they all know their roles. And that's what the Celtics are with the injuries and all that. With Porzingis back, you're trying to get to that point, because I just noticed the Thunder, when everybody comes in and goes, I know what I'm supposed to do. And that's championship caliber team. And the Celtics had that last year. And I think they're still trying to get that this year.
Yeah. Well, one of the challenges with that, Gary, is the fact that, when you bring everyone back, there's this assumption that everyone is just going to do what they did last year because it worked. You won a championship. But as we've seen throughout the course of the season, there's certain players who are part of their core group who are in very different roles. Payton Pritchard is counted upon to be a scorer for them. And we'll talk a little bit more about him later, but that's a little bit different for him. Porzingis, last year when he didn't play, it was primarily because of load management. But now when he doesn't play, there have been a lot of games where he just hasn't physically been able to go out there and play. And then you've got Al Horford, who's in a similar role. But it seems that when Al is expected to play, Al seems to be playing at a little bit higher level, as if there's a different level of expectations that he has to deliver, that he's taken upon himself to do more consistently. The Al Horford that we see now is better than the one we saw last year when you look at the way he's able to impact games when he's out there, even though the plan for him is still the same. And as you pointed out, Garrett, with Tatum and Brown, I think both of those guys, maybe more than any two top-tier players on a respective team, have embraced the fact that they have consistently put team agenda ahead of their own. Jalen, I think on almost any other team would be certainly mid to high 20-point scorer, but the team wouldn't be as good. And I think he knows that he needs Tatum, and Tatum knows that he definitely needs Jalen. I mean, Jalen was NBA Finals MVP. He was Eastern Conference Finals MVP. He stepped up and really filled a lot of those gaps that defenses were either limiting Jason Tatum in doing or they took away entirely. So understanding the roles, embracing those roles, that is what championship teams do. And Gary, to your point, I think OKC is looking around at Boston and in many ways, in respects, is trying to emulate what Boston does. And because they remember, they're a young team with young leadership. And so it's not like they can internally look at themselves and say, this is what we got to do because we've been through XYZ 1, 2, 3. They got to look around and say, are there teams out there that we can learn from that do things kind of the way we're trying to do them? And Boston is the best example of that. A team that has depth, a team that has great leadership in terms of its young leadership, and a team that really doesn't seem to be locked into trying to be have their own personal agendas. Whereas, you look at a lot of teams near the top, that's why they're not quite where they want to be, because there's too much me instead of us. So.
Right. So while we're on the subject of players that have the team agenda over their own, Derrick White has proven to be one of those players for the Celtics. And Eric Spoelstra this past week just said that he actually thinks that Derrick White is one of the most underrated players in the league, in the NBA. So do you two agree with that? And if so, why do you think that is?
Oh, yes. Steve White is very underrated. And he's underrated because I don't think people really appreciate the little things that he does. They look at the scoring. They look at, the blocking shots. He's the best shot blocking guard in the game. But they don't look at the things like him being in the right spot so that teams can't play Tatum too tight, or him being in the right spot so when they do play Tatum or Brown too closely, he'll be ready in position to catch and shoot. Or, his ability to put a defense on his heels and maybe not draw the foul, but maybe put them in a position where they have to cut off his path, which opens things up for others. He's just a really smart glue type player. Even though they're different kinds of players, he does remind me in some respects to what Tayshaun Prince meant to the Detroit Pistons years ago when they were one of the top teams. A guy that he's not quite your best player or even your second best player, but he may very well be your most indispensable player because of all the little things that he does and the fact that he does those things without necessarily looking or seeking to have a bigger, more prominent role. Another guy we talked about, at the top, Terry Rozier, who I love. T. Rose wanted a bigger role than he had in Boston, and I thought there were times where he played like that. And you don't see that with Derrick White. Derrick White knows that he's an important part of this team. He knows he has a very clear role, and he doesn't really try to deviate from that too much. He just simply goes out there, handle his business, and help this team keep racking up them dubs.
I think Derrick White is a player that, how do I put this? I think
Lord.
No. Sherrod, be quiet, guy.
Don't you be talking bad about Derrick White.
No, I'm about to say something that's
profound.
Yeah, we'll pull up on you now.
Profound.
Profound is hilarious.
Kwani, what you pulling up in?
I don't know. I'll figure it out. In an Uber.
And we ain't talking about the black Uber. We're talking about the basic, non-XL Uber.
The shared ride.
Kwani pulling up in an Uber like, what up, boo?
What sex you claim?
What you talking about? What you talking about, my man Derrick? I'm going to say this. I think I think when it's all said and done, Derrick White should get, if he continues his career, he should get eventually maybe some Hall of Fame consideration. And I'm not talking about he's a cinch Hall of Fame. I didn't say that.
That's what you mean.
But he's working himself into being a great player on a great team. And his defense, his shooting, he's never going to be the second best. Obviously, it's Tatum and Brown. But you start thinking about that third guy, and people will look back at these Celtic teams and go, okay, there was Tatum and Brown, but who was the third guy? You could say Drew. You might say Kristaps, you might say Al, but you also could say Derrick. And I think if he plays 7 or 8 more years, I mean, 6, he's pushing 30, so might not, he could get considered. If a guy like Michael Cooper made the Hall of Fame, if we're appreciating those players who were like, didn't put up the crazy numbers, but were stars in their roles, he could get consideration. I'm not talking about he's a cinch. He's never made All-Star, but he's an Olympian. He's a guy who's all defensive team. Like, he'll get, and it may be a little far-fetched. I'm not talking about he's a Hall of Famer. Please, Ahmed, do not put that on the
headlines tomorrow.
That's my headline. Derrick White, Hall of Famer?
Derrick White's a cinch Hall of Famer.
Wait for the YouTube headline.
If you look at guys like a Dennis Johnson, right? Not a perennial All-Star. He's in the Hall of Fame, right? The great Dennis Johnson. Like, they're guys who played roles on teams. Our friend Joe, the great JoJo White. Like, guys who were not, the first name out your mouth, but were guys who contributed to championships and contributed to winning and were indispensable parts. And Derrick White, at this point in his career in the last couple of years, has turned into one of those guys that you just think about. And I think as his career progresses, and we'll see what he does and what he's doing, we'll give more appreciation to him for his defense. He'll get so much more credit. And I think he gets credit now, but I think he'll be one of those guys that was like, hey, he wasn't a perennial All-Star, but man, that dude was a star. He was the one of the pieces of that team that like completed them. And I think, maybe not Hall of Fame, but just kind of like all-time great, like Celtic great. I'm not talking about the top 10, but just a guy who goes down with the appreciation of like, you did it. You were like Cedric Maxwell, did in his stint. Like guys we look at were on that championship, that were on championship teams that were, and if you look at those, 60 teams, you talk about Lasky and you talk about Tom Heinsohn and Don Nelson, who's in the Hall of Fame, Heinsohn, who's in the Hall of Fame, right? Lasky, who's in the Hall of Fame. You look at some of these guys, who are in the Hall of Fame, and you're like, well, they didn't put up the big numbers, but you know what? They certainly put up the numbers when it counted and were indispensable parts of those championship teams. I think Derrick White has a chance to be the same type of player.
Interesting take you got there, Gary Washburn. Interesting take. At some point, and we're not going to get into it today, but at some point we need to have like an over-under on Hall of Famers on this Celtics team. I got a number in mind. I think the number should be 4. We can talk about that later.
I like this. That's
exactly.
Kwani still want to pull up though.
No, we good.
Well, Kwani, save your pull-up energy, Kwani, for another day. Right now, Kwani. Right now, we want to give a shout out to our good friends, our peoples at PrizePicks. The race to the playoffs is starting to heat up, and PrizePicks is the best place to cash in on your favorite sports. Don't miss your chance to cash in as the league's best fight it out for playoff positioning. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, PrizePicks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. Run your game all season long on PrizePicks, which is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app. Again, it's the best place to win cash while watching your favorite players. They also offer weekly promotions like Taco Tuesday, where you can PrizePicks discounts select player projections up to 25% to provide you even more value for your lineups. They also invented the flex play, which means you can still cash out if your lineup isn't perfect. You can double your money even if one of your picks doesn't hit. So how do you get in? It's real simple. Download the app today and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download the app today. Use the code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game.
All right, thank you. Let's
thank
look
you,
ahead at this. Let's look ahead.
Don't make me run up on you, Gary, like Kwani.
Oh my gosh, no one's pulling up on anybody. How about that? All right. Well, the Celtics, though, they're pulling up on a 7-game road trip, right? It starts on Friday.
Well done, Kwani. I love it. I love it. Gary don't, but I do.
He doesn't. He hates it. It starts on Friday in Utah, but what are your realistic expectations for this road trip? Who are you paying attention to most as well?
Gary?
I think it's a 6-game trip, and I think they can win all 6 games. They're playing it's an interesting trip, though. They're playing some teams that are like they're playing some teams that got something to play for. Mm-hmm. Like, okay, so they go to Utah. That should be a dub. I think they go to Portland. Portland is now, if you look at Dallas and how bad they look, you look how Phoenix is giving up, right? Portland's 3.5 games from the 10th spot. If you're rooting for Chauncey Billups for success, if he brings that team to the playoffs in his 3rd season as coach, and even I don't care what they do, win or lose in that play-in game, if he gets them into the play-in, because Dallas is just a mash unit right now. I mean, they lost Dante Exum to a broken hand. I think Anthony Davis is going to try to come back, and maybe the Dallas is figuring let's just try to make the playoffs. But Phoenix, you can't count on them for nothing. Portland is going to be a tricky game because Portland's a back-to-back, and Portland's going to really try to win that game. And they played well in stretches in Boston. They made a run toward the end. But that's a tricky game. Then you got, I want to say Phoenix. Oh, sorry, Sacramento. Yeah. Sacramento. They're going for I think they're kind of the 9th spot, but that's going to be a tough game. The New Look Kings, they beat the Celtics in Boston, so that was with De'Aaron Fox. Now Sacramento's got Zach LaVine. You got guys. It's him and DeMar DeRozan again. We'll see how that goes. And then, so that's a tricky game, another tricky game. Then you got Phoenix. Which Phoenix is going to show up? Are they going to be ready to play? Are the Celtics going to smash them? Then you got San Antonio. No De'Aaron Fox, no Wemby. That should be a dub. And then you got the toughest one at the end, Memphis. Memphis is going to be in, but the Celtics should have a little payback because they lost at home to Memphis too. So you would think they could go 6-0. They could go 4-2. That would be, to me, the least that they should go. 4-2. You should beat Utah. You should beat 2 of the 3 of Phoenix, Portland, or Sacramento. Yeah. You should beat San Antonio. If you lose at Memphis and lose to one of the San Antonio, Portland, or Phoenix, Portland, Phoenix, or Sacramento, especially the Portland game in a back-to-back or something, then I think they could be forgiven for that. Mm-hmm. So 4-2 at the minimum, Sherrod. They could go 6-0. Well, but 4 wins minimum would be 3-3 ain't gonna cut it.
Listen, I expect them at worst to go 5-1, and here's why. Mm-hmm. I look at the Sacramento game and I look at that last one at Memphis. They're not going to lose both of those games. I think they may lose one, but they're not going to lose both. And the other teams that you talked about, Gary, they should have their way with them because there is no real reason why I can see them losing to Portland. Portland's playing better, but the Celtics, the other thing too, you got to keep in mind, and beating teams in their building is kind of what the Celtics do. That's part of what they're about. And I think these are probably of their extended road trips. This is probably from top to bottom, probably the easiest one that they have had this season. I expect them to win at least 5 out of these 6 games. Like you, Gary, I think there's a very real chance they can run the tables and win all 6. None of these teams are teams that if the Celtics were to see them, obviously it's not going to be a playoff situation, but if they were to see any of these teams in the playoffs, that team might win 1, maybe 2 games, if that. So this is the way this schedule is playing out. I'm more concerned about the Sacramento game because it's a back-to-back. It's the one game where the Celtics are not going to have their full, core guys because of it being a back-to-back and load management with either Al or Porzingis, or maybe even Drew Holiday too might be in that mix as well. So this is a great time for the Celtics to, again, lock up that number 2 spot because even with Cleveland losing the other day to Orlando, I just don't think the Celtics, there's enough games left in the schedule where they can make up significant ground and overtake Cleveland for that top spot, which is fine.
Mm-hmm. To that point, though,
I thought Portland was a back-to-back. It's Sherrod's right, totally right. The day off in Portland and they get Sacramento. So So you're right, Sherrod. That would be the tricky game. They get a day off, and they get 3 days off between, Brooklyn on Tuesday and Utah, then another day off. So, yeah, you're right. Sherrod, that Sacramento game would probably be the toughest of the trip other than the one at Memphis.
Yep.
But it helps that the Celtics have been good on the road as well. But looking ahead to the playoffs, where do you see the benefits for them with that being said?
I think the benefits are twofold. I think, first and foremost, if you're the Celtics, you walk into every single building with the ultimate level of confidence that you can win. Why? Because you literally do that better than anyone else in the NBA. You are more than comfortable putting your dirty shoes up in their house, on their carpet, and leaving it there and walking away with whatever it is you came to get. That's what you've been doing consistently this year. That's what great championship teams do. They find ways to win regardless of the locale. And the Celtics have been able to do that. So for them, that's what that's about. If you're playing the Celtics and you're the home team, you can't feel great about them coming into your building because you've seen what they do. Hell, many of you have experienced what they do on a regular. They are able to find ways to beat you in your building better than anyone else in the NBA. And so there's a certain mental edge that the Celtics have when they go on the road that is different than any other team because they do it better than any other team. And I think that does play out well in the playoffs because, remember, the Celtics are not going to be the number one seed. So at some point, if this thing goes according to seedings, they're going to have to win a game in Cleveland. And the Celtics are more than comfortable and confident that they can win a game in Cleveland. Hell, they're confident they could probably win both games in Cleveland if they really felt it was absolutely necessary, or if Cleveland got a little too comfortable, with the idea of them being at home. So the Celtics, I think the fact that they're such a great road team is exactly the type of thing that will benefit, a team like them going into the playoffs. Gary?
Oh, I mean, yeah. Oh, you wanted my – okay.
I was sure you wanted to chime in. You didn't have to.
Yeah, I mean – I think that at this point, like Sherrod pointed out astutely, I guess.
Compliments today.
Yeah, the Celtics at this point, they're in a very good spot. They've created enough distance between them and the Knicks to where number 2 should be clinched. They are not going to catch Cleveland. I think it's 7.5 games right now. Cleveland lost yesterday on a rare occasion. Their 16-game winning streak was snapped, and and when you have a team that has a 15-game winning streak to start the season and then another 16-game winning streak in the season, like, they're just going to be hard to catch. I mean, the Celtics can point to their home record as to why they're not at par with Cleveland. A lot of those home losses, that the home record is going to be why they're the number 2 seed and not the number 1 seed. But I also think they're playing better ball at home. I think they'll be fine. The one thing you want to avoid, like Sherrod pointed out, is losing some playoff home games, losing one of those opening games in that first round or the second round where, suddenly now you're in a dogfight. But they can win on the road. They've proven they're a better road team than home team. They're going to have a better road record this year than home record. I think they're 25-7, something like that, 26-7 away from the Garden. So, which is impressive. Very, very impressive record. I think they were 27-14 last year. So they are already almost matched their road win total, and there's still 14 ball games left. So that's impressive for the Celtics. I just think it's all about rest. It's all about getting some of those back of the bench guys reps, the Baylor Shiremans, a guy like a Torrey Craig, because like Sherrod pointed out, I think in the last podcast, he might win a playoff game for you. He might hit a shot, make a steal, get a rebound that could hit. And then the most important player to me down the stretch is Neemias Queta. Like, they got to get him playoff ready, because he's so up and down. Luke is going to be solid. Al will be fine on rest. Kristaps, great comeback against Brooklyn. You hope that he stays healthy and away from the illnesses. But Queta's the guy that if they get him at a playoff level, they're going to be tough to beat.
Absolutely. And when you talk about things that are tough to beat, it's hard to beat them prices that we get from our good friends at Gametime. listen, with the playoffs are right around the corner and the Celtics hitting the road, this is an opportunity for Celtics fans to see, their team play and not have to break the bank to do so. Game Time has you covered with great ticket prices on all types of sporting events as well as concerts. When you're thinking about going to a game, the first place you really need to think about is Game Time. And with the Celtics, again, with this long road trip that they're about to embark upon, there are going to be lots of opportunities for their fans to check them out and see what the green team is about and not, again, have to break the bank to do it because Game Time has you covered with great prices. In addition to the prices, specifically the all-in pricing, which is that shows you the total price that you're going to pay before you get to the checkout, which is one of the really cool features of the Game Time app. You also get a chance to see the panoramic view of the seats that you are looking to purchase tickets at before you get to the checkout, before you have to actually pay. So you know exactly the sight lines that you're working with before you got to cut the check and pay for those tickets, which is, again, one of the great benefits of the Game Time app. And all you have to do to get in on this is download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. And again, that's download the app, create an account, and use the code CLNS to get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. What time is it? Game time.
Well done. All right, before we close out, we have two players to talk about on the Celtics squad. The first one is going to be Payton Pritchard. He has now NBA record for the most threes off the bench in a single season. Does that mean anything to people that are not Celtics fans or Pritchard's family? Let's start with
Gary does. It means everything to Gary. That's why he wore Pritchard colors today.
He actually hung a poster of him up on his wall this morning. I know for a fact. I don't know for it's right behind you.
How's she know?
Right there. It's right there. That's creepy. And now that I think about it,
it was creepy.
I'm not a stalker.
Nah, that's why Kwani about to pull up on somebody.
Right.
She already pulled up, Gary. She just didn't let you know. She pulled up. You didn't even know.
Yeah.
Damn, Ford Festiva outside Uber letting her off. What up? Woo!
Yeah.
Anyway,
Pritchard.
Yeah. I think it's a very nice record. It was previously held by Wayne Ellington, who was a nice three-point shooter in his career, but it wasn't like he broke Steph's record or, I just think in these days and times, you can look for every record now. Like LeBron's 50,000th point, because you add regular season and playoffs. Who was the previous record holder? You would think maybe Kareem, but I don't think people were adding up Kareem's regular season and playoff points and being like, okay, that's the record. Like some of these records are just coming up and like, oh, that's crazy.
The first guy to stand up and then make a shot.
But I appreciate and applaud. It shows the type of season that Payton is having.
Sure.
I hope he'll be up for the sixth man of the year. I don't know if he'll get it. I think Malik Beasley's making a run. There's other guys that are making runs, and that have had good seasons off the bench. But I think this has been a completely great season for Payton Pritchard, and it shows the bargain of a con. Once again, another great Brad Stevens move. 3 years, $21 million, $7 million for a guy who is going to be a major value to your team. I mean, and people thought, that's a kind of a lot for Payton when he first signed the deal, but it ended up being, with his performance, his work ethic, a major bargain. You look at some of the guys who are making 12, 13, 14 million. You look at some of the guys, and we talked about Sherrod's longtime buddy, his homeboy, T. Rose, who had a rough year, and he's making what, 30 million? What's he making? You look at
my guy though.
Yeah, you look at some of the value contracts of the guys that are playing great minutes, and you look at some of the guys that are vastly overpaid, that making too much money, and then you look at Payton and the Celtics. The one thing the Brad Stevens way, in many cases, they don't carry no bad contracts. They don't have guys on their roster who you're like, man, that dude's just stealing money right now. Like, they haven't had a guy like that in years. And if they do, it was a 1 year, a rental player, his contract was expiring, where it's like, hey, we just want, it was during that transition period where they just get a guy in and, okay, his contract's now off the books. Nobody from the Celtics is making exorbitant amount of money that you're just like, man, that dude just stealing dollars, man. Like they got to get rid of that deal. And you look at some of these other teams and some of the salaries that some of these other guys are making, like a Miami. You know, you want Duncan Robinson's deal, you want that 5-year, $90 million deal he signed. You want.
I see what you did there, Gary.
No, don't do that. I didn't. You know, it might have been a value. It might have been a value back then. But you look at some of these other guys that are making money and the exorbitant salaries they get, and you know the Celtics. They're not on the Celtics because the Celtics get their value out of their player. You know, you want to look at you want Bradley Beal on your team making $50 million. You know,
work for it.
I mean, you want, you know what I'm saying? You want Fred VanVleet making $43 million. Like, you look at somebody, and I'm talking like they're not good players, but you look at some of the, you know, look at the Knicks. OG Anunoby, $212 million over 4 years. Like, you want that contract? You want him on your team? That's great. Is he stopping Jason or Jalen? No, not at all. So you look at the guys. Jason Tatum is the 39th highest paid player in the league this year, right? That's value. Now, it's going to go up next year by $20 million, right? But it just shows you the Celtics are very economical and they get the best out of their players. Our friend T. Rose, Sherrod, your boy, has another year on his contract. That's going to be interesting. He's making $25 million this year. You know, Bruce Brown is making $23 million this year. Mm. And Payton Pritchard is making 7, 8. That's crazy. What a value. What a great signing. And he's lived up to it. And hopefully he'll get more. He's going to get more money down the road because he's going to be that type of player.
Yeah. And again, he'll deserve it. I mean, even if his play levels out and, you know, or flattens out, so to speak, he's still worth significantly more than what he's getting now. And the thing that I really liked about Payton Pritchard, just watching him, you know, these past few years, is the high level of irrational confidence that he's got in his game. You can't tell that dude he ain't nice. I mean, think about it. You playing behind an all 6th man of the year candidate and a defensive player of the year, and you seriously think you're better than him. I think he really felt that he could do more to help this team than Brogdon and Marcus Smart. And so when those guys were moved out of the picture and he had no choice but you either show up or you sit down, he showed up in a big way. So I love the confidence that he plays with. And at some point he is going to get paid. He will be an 8-figure salary NBA player. No question about it. 10, 15, 20 million, somewhere in that ballpark. That's what he's going to be pulling in, you know, when this comes time for him to get a new deal. And whether it's in Boston or elsewhere, we don't know that, but we do know that he is putting the work to position himself for that type of deal. And it's just great to see because, like I said, you like to see a little fella, you know, overachieving and making the most of his opportunities. And Payton has done that consistently.
Well, Sherrod, maybe it would help if you didn't call him little fella. Like,
is he 6'9", Gary?
No, but damn, little fella.
Gary. He's an undersized quarterback. You heard the same scouting reports that I did when he was coming out. So let's not act as if we talk about 6'5".
Little fella exceeded expectations.
Right? I think we can all admit the NBA has skewed our concept of height and age.
Little fella.
Little fella is disrespectful. Anyway, second guy we're going to talk about. This guy can't. JD Davison.
You need to pull up on Gary, Kwani.
Sherrod gonna pay him all the compliments in the world and call him little fella.
Let's talk about JD Davison before we close out.
Another little fella. Actually, he's not little. That's a lie. He is not little.
No, he's not. Oh my God. He's 6'3". Don't do that.
Well,
he's not little.
He's not little. He's been showing out in Maine. Right now, he's averaging 25.1 points, 7.5 assists, and 5.5 rebounds per game. He just had a 34-point game on Sunday. He's been showing out in Maine, but why do you two think he hasn't been able to get called back up to Boston? Shipping up to Boston.
He hasn't had a lot of opportunities to play. And when he has had opportunities, he's been okay, but he hasn't been great. And I think that, to me, that's the only way players like JD, particularly when you look who's ahead of him on the depth chart already in Boston, that's the only way you're going to break through. You are going to have to perform at a level that showcases you being a viable option going forward. I think about guys like Isaiah Thomas, who played here in Boston, about how every opportunity he got a chance, he made the most of it. I mean, as the last pick in the draft, when he was in Sacramento, he got an opportunity to do some things. He made the most of it. When he played in that weird 3-guard lineup that they had in Phoenix for a hot minute, he didn't get to play a ton, but he did play enough to where he showed he could be an impact player. And in Boston, people forget that, Marcus Smart got hurt. And that was the opening that Isaiah Thomas needed to get more run as a starter. And once he got in that first group, he never looked back. And JD, I think, has to understand that when you get in the game, you've got to do whatever it is that you do well at the G League. You've got to show that some of those skills translates at the next level. There's just something that doesn't quite click well enough when he's out there playing with these guys that gives you confidence, or gives Joe Mazzulla confidence that maybe this is the guy that we need to keep on the active roster. That's why he's a two-way contract guy, not an active roster guy.
That's fair.
Yeah, I see the improvement. Like, it's hard on these kids, man. Like, JD should have stayed his ass at Alabama for at least another year. He was not quite ready. He was a dude who was, fast and played with his hair on fire at Alabama. And then he jumps into the draft, not quite ready. And then it's taken him 2 to 3 years, because this would be, I want to say, his senior year. This is his third year, right? This would be his senior year of college, right? So now you could see the NBA player in him. He plays more under control. His shot's gotten better. But the one thing about the G League is you can put up numbers there, and people say, oh, Bronny James is doing great in the G League. Well, that don't register to the NBA as much as people would like. Like, the numbers in the G League are kind of skewed. You cannot look at a guy who's doing stuff in the G League and be like, oh, that's going to translate automatically. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. I think with JD, he just needs to get more playing time. He needs to play a full NBA game. And hopefully over the next couple of weeks, 14 games left, maybe those last 2 games against Charlotte, who knows? He'll get a chance to start, and he'll get 35 to 40 minutes in the game just to see people can see his improvement. Because I saw him at Toronto a couple of weeks ago, and he came in the third quarter, and he handled himself well. He played like 8-9 minutes. He had an assist. He had a shot. Like, it was like, wow, okay. And then Joe didn't play him in the fourth quarter or whatever. They ended up getting a win. Like, you could see the improvement. You can see it. But JD is probably going to have to, go to another team that's not so good, that can give him a chance to be, let's say, a backup point guard or a number 3 point guard, or he's going to try to do it maybe in Boston again. I don't think summer league's going to do anything for him anymore. He's been in enough summer leagues. He's done enough G League. It's either next year for him, the NBA, or go overseas and make some real money and maybe come back in a couple years if people don't think he's ready to be like a number 2 point guard or number 3 point guard. But like Sherrod said, enough talent here. You got Drew that can run the point. Derrick can run the point. Payton at times can run the point. They play Jason at point forward at times. So the ball handling guy isn't as much needed. Now, do I think they could use a guy who, a little quick guy, could dive into the paint and get the ball? Yeah, I think they could use a guy like him, because Payton's natural position isn't point. Let's say he's more of a undersized 2. He's the little fella is an undersized 2 guard. But for JD, I think he's kind of a combo guard, a little bigger, who can play point. But I just think he needs reps. He needs to play 3 or 4 games down the stretch where you can see the improvement. And it might not happen in Boston, unfortunately, because I think he's a great kid. He's done everything right. He's done everything he's supposed to do. He's now, and they like him, but it might not happen in Boston.
Yeah,
that's fair. All right. Well, that's all I have for today. Anything from you two before we close out?
I just want to make sure you don't pull up on me, so we good.
I ain't pulling up on nobody.
You can pull up on Gary though.
No, I'm good.
I wanted to give a farewell to two guys. The first, Oliver Miller. Sherrod remembers him, played at Arkansas, played in the NBA. Was, died of cancer, 54, around our age in terms of our generation of player. And Oliver got a lot of heat for being, he was an overweight player, and luckily it was kind of before the social media stage, and social media would have tore him apart, unfortunately, in this generation. But he was an all around good guy and played 9 years in the league and tried his best. And he passed away of cancer. And then secondly, the great Junior Bridgman, who passed away a week ago. And this is a man who built generational wealth after his NBA career. His highest salary was $3 in his last years of his deal, because he played till he retired in 1987. He made $350,000 his final year, right? And I would probably presume he might have made $2 to $3 million during his career, if you add up all 12 years. But he turned himself into a billionaire. He turned himself into a business mogul. This is not a guy, and you can compare him to Shaq, but Shaq made generational wealth during his career. Same with Magic Johnson. Same with some of these LeBron. Like Junior Bridgman was a self-made man who turned himself into a mogul during his career by taking the business courses and acumen. Had 100-something Wendy's and Chili's restaurants. He sold that. He bought. He was actually connected to Sherrod, who freelances for Ebony and Jet.
Mm-hmm.
Junior Bridgman owned Ebony and Jet. He's a 10% owner of the Milwaukee Bucks. So God bless him. His memory. Just an amazing man that not a lot of people heard about, because he wasn't on the TV a lot. He was behind the scenes. But this is a guy, we watch all these shows, we all this negative stuff about these guys losing their money and, going broke and having to, get regular jobs or go back into coaching, or, their assistant coach in the G League or whatever, because that's what's paying the bills. And Junior Bridgman was the model for what an NBA player should do after his career. And especially now, where a lot of these guys are earning generational wealth. They're earning enough money for their grandkids to be comfortable, right? This is not the old days where all these players knew after their career was over, they had to work, because the $12 million they made during their career was not going to last unless they invested it and it turned into, exponentially more. They were going to have to work. So the Isaiah Thomases and guys who are still doing great work and doing, TV work and things like that, we applaud those guys. But Junior Bridgman became a business mogul. So God bless him. God bless his memory, his family. It's just sad.
Yeah. Thank you for that. That's all we have for this week's episode of the Big 3 NBA podcast. And like we've said, please send this episode to someone that you think would enjoy it. If you found it informational, share it, subscribe, like, all the things. We appreciate all the support. But until next week, for Sherrod Blakely and Gary Washburn, I'm Kwani Lunis. Thank you for listening to the Big 3 NBA podcast.
Just don't pull up on me, Kwani. All right.
I will.
Got me scared. Think about you pulling up on me, Gary. You too, Gary, right? She's scary when she pull up on you.